Well, hey guys and gals, I'm Andy Ashram, editor over here at bloomerboomer.com, continuing now into our second season with Gregory Hammer, the author of Gain Without Pain, the tool chest you can't live without to conquer the walls of internal and external struggle. Included in the acronym of his book is GAIN, GAIN, and today is N for non-judgment, and that's what we are talking about today, non-judgment. In a moment, we will explore that further with Dr. Gregory Hammer, professor at Stanford University School of Medicine in pediatrics. Now, if you would like to be part of this amazing journey with bloomerboomer.com, with the community here, please register on the website for the newsletter and some qualify for some member benefits. We live stream obviously on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, Twitch, and Instagram, and also on the website bloomerboomer.com. And in the meantime, we'll hear from Dr. Gregory Hammer and Gain Without Pain. But first, remember to join the Boomer community. And with that, I am going to say, hey, Greg, good to see you again. How are you today?
Never better, Andy. Great to be with you as always.
Oh, absolutely. Well, listen, today's topic, non-judgment. Talk about that and how it fits into the whole GAIN acronym.
Sure. First of all, Andy, I think that we are even unaware of the extent to which we're constantly judging everything around us and ourselves. Our minds are commonly going to comparison between one person and another, between others and ourselves. And there's often a negative overlay to this related to the negativity bias that we've talked about. So when we compare ourselves to others, we are often either on the negative side about the other, or we're being very self-judgmental and being very hard on ourselves, which I think many of us, if not most of us, tend to do. And this constant categorizing and reducing one thing into a little box and organizing everything is really exhausting. It spends a lot of our mindful energy, and it's sort of always going on in the background, and it does exhaust us. I think that it contributes to burnout, which is that sort of fatigue that we experience related to stress. And often by casting ourselves in a negative light compared to others, by judging ourselves harshly, it's a real downer. It contributes to unhappiness and a lack of resilience. So I think it's really essential that we, first of all, recognize when we're doing this, and then start to train ourselves to develop some remedies so that we can let go of these constant comparisons and judgments.
Yeah, we really do judge ourselves harshly, and I know I do, and I think probably it's common among a lot of us. All the words that make up the GAIN acronym, are very challenging. I mean, all of them are challenging to master. Non-judgment seems like one of the most because, judging others seems to come maybe just too easily, and it's so difficult to refrain from judging others. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, I think that the GAIN elements, practicing gratitude, acceptance, intention, and non-judgment, are actually very basic. I think that they're really very simple. We just have to acknowledge that, as with training a muscle for running a marathon or what have you, we have to proceed in small increments, baby steps. It took us decades in most of our cases to have our minds wired the way they are, and we're not going to retrain them or rewire them overnight. So we start with small practices. And of course, as you know, in the book, I describe the GAIN meditation as a very simple 3-minute exercise in the morning. After we do our morning hygiene, we find a quiet place to sit. We get in touch with our breath, maybe slow it down, take a breath in to a count of 3, pause for a count of 2, and then effortlessly release the breath to a count of 4. And this slowing slows our heart rate. It starts to bring our adrenaline and cortisol levels down, and settles us in. And then we can go through the sequential contemplation of gratitude, acceptance, intention, and non-judgment. And those can be just, very simple contemplations, and they lay the groundwork for a course of action during the day. And we can just, for example, pick non-judgment. And let's say our intention today is to let go of any judgment we start to form of the first person that we encounter today. Perhaps on our drive to work, we encounter somebody who's driving, changing lanes without using their turn signal. Perhaps they cut us off a bit, and we start to get our adrenaline up and start to get a little stressed, maybe start to get a little angry, and then we make a judgment about the other person. This is the kind of driver they are. They're not as good a driver as I am. They're a bad driver. And when we recognize that we're doing that, simply let go of the judgment and view the other driver just exactly as he or she is, without labeling it good or bad. And I'll give you an example that I give in the book, but it's a very simple one. So I do my gain meditation in the morning, have a cup of coffee, I ride my bike to work, and I pass through a small lane on my way to the medical center every day. And it's a beautiful lane, kind of a cobblestone road, and it's got a beautiful canopy of trees overhead. The sunlight from the early morning is often filtering through, and it's peaceful and quiet. And as I'm riding my bike down the lane, I encounter another person who's walking in front of me. And I notice as I get a bit closer that they've got buds in their ears, and then I notice they're looking at their screen, and I start to think to myself, why are they looking at their screen? This is such a beautiful place just to enjoy the moment. And then as I get closer, I realize they're in my way, and I'm going to have to go around them. And why are they walking right in the middle of the lane? It's fairly narrow, and how inconsiderate. And then I catch myself, okay, now I'm making these judgments. I had just sworn that the first person I see, I'm going to drop all judgment. So I realize that I'm sort of developing a bit of an antagonistic relationship with this person. We haven't even looked at each other yet. So I laugh to myself and I drop those judgments, and I just see the person as he or she is, without any judgment at all. And as I ride my bike past them, we look at each other and smile, and I'm on my way. And lo and behold, it was a pleasant interaction instead of an unpleasant interaction. And I kind of laugh at myself for almost screwing that up by making these automatic judgments about this other person. And that's just one small example. That may be it for the day. If my intention after my gain meditation was simply to drop judgment of the first person that I began to judge, I've succeeded. And so it's baby steps. And, I think these are things that make us feel good rather than give us kind of that negative feeling when we have an interaction with somebody else.
Yeah, and that's a good way to explain it. Take baby steps. We don't necessarily have to conquer the whole thing at one time.
Right.
And also in your book, you bring up a good point that, how we judge ourselves so harshly. We have to
Absolutely.
learn there too.
Yes. I mean, and for me, that's probably the most difficult barrier to overcome in my own life and my own approach to being mindful is how hard I am on myself. And I know that many of us are that way. And if we can learn to let go of judgments about others, it will eventually occur to us that it's only logical and natural for us to drop judgments of ourselves. So we can do a little cognitive behavioral exercise, for example, which next time we find ourselves feeling badly about ourselves and feeling, obsessing over the past in maladaptive ways, feeling regret and shame, imagine that we're now talking to a dear friend who's feeling exactly the same sensations and emotions and very hard on themselves. And they're talking to us, describing what they did and how they're embarrassed and how they wish they hadn't done it. And, I think we can all imagine that we would be reassuring and we would tell our friend, you did nothing wrong. You did nothing to be ashamed of. You're only human, just like the rest of us. So let's pretend we're talking to a dear friend when we consider our own shame and regret. and treat ourselves the way we would treat a dear friend. So, we're reluctant to judge somebody that we care deeply about. And we should be able to recognize the logic and the sensibility of treating ourselves in the same manner, and letting go of self-judgment as well.
But you must agree, we do judge a lot. I mean, we almost have it as part of ourselves that we judge others for all kinds of reasons. It's a hard one to maybe understand in the sense that some judgments are better than others.
Sure.
You know.
Well, I think we can recognize that we've all made premature judgments. We sort of jump to conclusions, and then when we learn a little bit more about the other person or their circumstances, we realize that we were a bit harsh and premature in our judgment. And I think the more we can recognize that and really kind of turn ourselves in that direction, the better off we are. Another thing is that John Kabat-Zinn defined mindfulness as an awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So I think there are several of the GAIN mindfulness principles embodied in Dr. Kabat-Zinn's definition of mindfulness. It's awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose. So this is intention in the present moment, non-judgmentally. And what he meant by that is that we are better served whenever possible, recognizing when we're obsessing over thoughts of the past and the future that are maladaptive, bring ourselves back into the present moment. And that requires intention. When we recognize that we're obsessing over the past and feeling regret and shame, or dwelling maladaptively on the future and feeling fear and anxiety, let's recognize it. Once we get used to recognizing our thought patterns and how negative they are, and how hard we are on ourselves, we can begin to turn toward letting go of those obsessive feelings and thoughts and bringing ourselves into the present moment. And we do so without judgment, meaning we see the world and others and eventually ourselves as exactly how they are and how we are, without judgment. We simply are who we are. The world is simply the way it is. We didn't create it. We're in all likelihood not going to cure it. So let's just drop the judgment of good or bad.
Yeah. Now, Bill, can a couple of questions came in. Can I shoot these off here? And
Absolutely.
Bill says he feels too quick to judge, and I guess he says he's looking for a tool, a way to trick himself from being too judgmental. Well, maybe that's the book. That's what it does. But he's looking for something like that.
Sure. Well, yeah, I think the GAIN method is exactly geared toward that. But, let's just do an imaginary scenario where we are a newborn, or we have the mind of a beginner, and suddenly we're plunked into this world, and we look around us and we see trees and homes and streets and people walking around. And this is all brand new to us. So we don't know anything about good or bad, or too much of this or too much of that, too much noise, not enough sound, too big, too small. Just imagine that we have that mind of a beginner and start to look at things in a new way, with no preconceptions. And, there are a lot of little exercises like that we can do. I went to a Qigong retreat with Ming Tong, who's a very well-known teacher who's got a retreat center in New Mexico now.
Yeah, he was a guest on here not long ago.
Oh, he was?
Yeah.
Oh, one of my favorite people, just a delightful man.
Uh-huh.
He was leading an exercise where we paired off with our partner, and he said, okay, arbitrarily, the person with longer hair face the other person and repeat the phrase, "You are good, you are good, you are good." And then we switched. And then he said, now I'd like the person with longer hair to face the person with shorter hair and say, "You are bad," repeatedly. "You are bad, you are bad." And then he said, how did it feel to tell the other person and to be told, "You are good"? And people thought, well, it felt good. how did it feel to be told or tell somebody you are bad? Everybody said it felt bad. And I thought to myself, there's a point to this exercise. And I'm not so sure it felt good to be telling someone else they were good and be told I was good, because, as he then explained, somebody who's making a judgment that you are good may change their mind a few minutes later and decide that you are bad. So these judgments are just unnecessary. They don't really add anything to our experience. Obviously, we have to be discerning, and there are things that we really enjoy and things that we don't enjoy so much. I don't enjoy so much being in a very crowded room as opposed to going on a hike in nature surrounded by tall trees. But that's discernment. That's not judgment. That's not to say this is bad, that is good. It's simply that, my preference is to put myself into this more mind-opening and heart-opening experience. But we can just start to practice these little exercises, take baby steps, and pretty soon we'll find that we're recognizing that making these judgments is really not helpful to us.
Yeah, I'm glad you made that distinction. That helps out. Cindy, she says, on the other hand, though, that she was taught not, to judge a book by its cover. She finds herself falling in to the trap. Cindy's is trying to hold back judging people, and that's kind of where she's at the moment.
Well, I would bet that Cindy is happier when she lets go of those judgments or doesn't form those judgments and just experiences what is without putting a label on it.
Yeah, the labels can kill you. That's for sure. Hey, that's all good. And next week we're gonna cover the next one, the next letter in gain. I guess that's N, huh?
Well, I
No,
think we're on N. Yeah. So I
okay,
think what we may do next time, actually, Andy, if you're up for it
yeah.
and your audience is up for it, is sort of put it all together and talk about the gain meditation. And maybe we can even do a brief meditation on the show.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Yeah, I'm gonna look forward to that. That is fantastic. Let's see, and tell us just about the book. We've talked about it, but Gain Without Pain, the Happiest Handbook. The Happiness
Yeah.
Handbook, yeah.
The Happiness Handbook for Healthcare Professionals is the one that's been published, and it's on Amazon. People can go to my website, greghammermd.com, GREGHAMMERMD.com. And there's a link to lots of media, including your shows that we've done and others, and also to the book. And there's a pocketbook version of Gain Without Pain coming out entitled Gain Without Pain, Your Happiness Handbook. And that'll be out early next year. And then we'll have a series of others. We're working on one for teens, as a matter of fact. So the Gain Without Pain message, I'm hoping to spread it around as much as I can, Andy.
Yeah, it has so many applications. That's really, really good. Great seeing you again, Greg, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week and go through that exercise.
Looking forward to it, Andy. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for watching. Greg will be back here same day, same time next week. We'll double check the schedules, but it looks that way. Again, Dr. Greg Hammer, author of Gain Without Pain. You can find out more on Facebook and at YouTube and at bloomerboomer.com. If you like this, please, of course, like us on Facebook and follow us. And in the meantime, we'll see you next time. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.